There's a battle that changed Japan forever. January 1868. The Battle of Toba-Fushimi. The shogunate forces had superior numbers, better training. They should have won. But they didn't. Not because they were defeated in combat, but because two samurai clans, Yodo and Tsu, switched sides in the middle of the battle. They betrayed their lord. They broke the sacred code of Bushido. And historians still can't fully explain why. Because the records were deliberately destroyed. What survived wasn't the official story. It was the psychology of men who chose betrayal over obedience, and in doing so, chose themselves over everything they were taught to be. To understand this betrayal, you must first understand what it meant to be samurai. For 250 years under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan had been frozen in time. The samurai weren't just warriors, they were a philosophy made flesh. Bushido, the way of the warrior, demanded absolute obedience, loyalty to your lord, duty above desire, honor above life itself. This wasn't metaphorical. Samurai who questioned orders could be forced to commit seppuku, ritual suicide, to restore their honor. The code was so strict that it didn't just punish disobedience, it punished doubt. And for generations, this system worked, because samurai believed their suffering had meaning. Their sacrifice upheld the natural order. Their obedience maintained cosmic harmony. The philosopher Yamamoto Tsunetomo wrote in Hagakure, "The way of the samurai is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death." But by the 1860s, something had changed. The world outside Japan was modernizing. Western powers were demanding trade. The shogunate was collapsing under its own weight, and the samurai code, once a source of meaning, had become something else entirely, a cage that no longer protected them, only confined them. January 27, 1868. Shogunate forces marched toward Kyoto, 15,000 strong, to suppress the rebel domains of Satsuma and Choshu. Among them, warriors from the Yodo and Tsu clans, men who had served the shogunate loyally for generations. But something was different this time. The shogunate was losing, not just militarily, but morally. The emperor himself had sided with the rebels. The Tenno, the divine sovereign, had declared the shogunate forces to be enemies of the throne. Now think about what that meant for a samurai mind. You've been raised to believe in two absolutes: absolute loyalty to your lord, the shogun, absolute reverence for the emperor, the divine authority. But now those two loyalties are in conflict. Which one do you obey when both claim your soul? On the second day of battle, something appeared that changed everything. The Nishiki no Mihata, the emperor's brocade banner, a sacred flag that transformed the rebel forces into an imperial army. Suddenly, the shogunate forces weren't fighting rebels, they were fighting the will of heaven itself. And in that moment, the warriors of Yodo and Tsu made a choice that would have been unthinkable just days before. They closed their castle gates to their own allies. They refused entry to the retreating shogunate forces. And then they switched sides. Not gradually, not after negotiation. In a single moment, they chose a new master. Here's what the history books don't tell you. This wasn't about political calculation. It was about psychological survival. Modern psychology has a term for what these samurai experienced: cognitive dissonance, the mental agony of holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously. You are loyal to the shogun, but the emperor commands otherwise. You believe in Bushido, but Bushido is destroying you. You serve the system, but the system is collapsing. When cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable, the mind does something desperate. It rewrites reality to escape the contradiction. The appearance of the emperor's banner didn't just change the political situation. It gave these samurai permission to redefine who they were. Because here's the truth they couldn't speak aloud. They didn't betray the shogun despite Bushido. They betrayed him because of it. Bushido demanded absolute loyalty to the highest authority. And the moment the emperor revealed himself as that authority, their betrayal became obedience. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius understood this paradox. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But the samurai of Yodo and Tsu had no such clarity. They had been trained to believe their minds belonged to external authority, and when those authorities contradicted each other, their sense of self shattered. The betrayal wasn't political. It was the psychological equivalent of pressing the reset button on their own identity. Imagine this moment. Shogunate forces retreat in chaos toward Yodo Castle. Wounded men, broken formations, desperation in their eyes. They approach the castle gates, gates that have always opened for them. But this time, the gates stay closed. The Lord of Yodo stands on the ramparts and watches his former comrades beg for sanctuary, and he does nothing. This wasn't cowardice, it was something far more complex. It was a man choosing between two deaths, the death of his identity or the death of his soul. If he opens the gates, he defies the emperor and becomes a traitor to heaven. If he keeps them closed, he betrays his brothers and becomes a traitor to honor. Both choices destroy him, so he chooses the one that lets him survive. Not physically, many of these samurai would die in the wars that followed, but psychologically, he closes the gate to who he used to be and becomes someone new. The philosopher Miyamoto Musashi wrote, "There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within." But what happens when everything within is built on loyalty to something outside yourself? What happens when that external structure collapses? The samurai of Yodo and Tsu discovered the answer. You either rebuild yourself or you die with the ruins. So why did these clans betray the shogunate? Not for power, many received no reward. Not for survival, the war was far from decided. They betrayed because their code of honor had become psychologically unbearable. For 250 years, Bushido had given samurai identity, purpose, meaning. But by 1868, it had become something else. A system that demanded they sacrifice themselves for a regime that was already dead. A code that required them to die for an order that no longer served anyone. Honor had become a form of suicide. And the appearance of the emperor's banner didn't just give them a new master. It gave them permission to admit what they'd been feeling all along, that the old way was killing them. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when the why disappears? When duty becomes meaningless? When honor becomes indistinguishable from self-destruction? That's when betrayal stops being a sin and becomes an act of survival. The samurai of Yodo and Tsu didn't break the code. The code broke them. And in that moment of fracture, they discovered something terrifying. That they existed underneath the code. That there was a self beneath the uniform. And that self wanted to live. This story isn't about Japan. It's about what happens when the identity we build becomes the prison we can't escape. Because we all have our Bushido, the job title that defines us, the ideology we defend, the image we maintain. We build ourselves on codes of conduct, belief systems, identities that feel permanent, until the day they don't. Until the company collapses, until the belief system cracks, until the person you've been stops making sense. And then you face the same choice the samurai of Yodo and Tsu faced. Do you die with the old identity, or do you betray it to survive? Here's the question that should disturb you. What code are you following that you'd rather destroy yourself than question? What loyalty are you maintaining out of fear rather than conviction? What gate are you keeping closed? Because opening it would mean admitting you were wrong. The samurai thought their code would protect them. Instead, it became the thing they had to escape. The Battle of Toba-Fushimi ended the shogunate, but it revealed something more important, that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't loyalty. It's knowing when to walk away from the code that's destroying you. The samurai who broke Bushido didn't betray their honor. They betrayed the lie that honor was worth more than their humanity. And that's a betrayal we should all be brave enough to commit.